Welcome to Woosh TV. In this video we are going to talk about the 10 things you didn't know about Pablo Escobar. Before starting this video, like this video, and subscribe to Woosh TV for future updates. Pablo Escobar was born in December 1949, to a poor farmer and an elementary school teacher. Pablo Escobar's parents worked as a farmer and a school teacher. According to reports, he started with petty crimes, such as selling fake diplomas when he was a teenager. Then, he added the falsification of report cards. Soon, he started selling smuggled stereo equipment and stolen tombstones. His inauspicious beginnings certainly didn't limit his ambition. He grew up telling friends that he would be a millionaire by 22, and the future president of Colombia. He found novel ways to earn cash during his teens, filing names off headstones to steal and sell, to smugglers and selling contraband cigarettes. By the time he moved into the drug trafficking trade in the mid-70s, his thirst for power and money was unstoppable. Pablo Escobar had an enormous fleet of airplanes, helicopters, yachts, and also had numerous houses across the country. Colombian authorities alone confiscated some of his properties, comprising 141 houses, 142 planes, 20 helicopters, and 32 yachts. According to investigations, plastic explosives were used to detonate Avianca Flight 203. Pablo Escobar ordered the bombing, believing that the flight held the presidential candidate 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐿 Trujillo as one of its passengers. On the other hand, some believe that Pablo assumed that some of his drug trade rivals were on the flight. No matter what his reason was, the explosion still had over 100 fatalities, leaving no survivors. As the head of the Medellin cartel, Escobar was to become the richest criminal in history by the time he met his end in a shootout with the Colombian National Police. To explore the dizzying figures behind his empire is to peer into another world entirely, one which is tinged with cocaine madness and a huge amount of blood. With a net worth reaching a present-day equivalent of $56 billion, Pablo Escobar remains the richest drug dealer of all time. He holds this distinction over other notorious drug kingpins, such as Amado Carrillo Fuentes, 𝐦𝐤𝐤𝐿 Cascar, and 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐤𝐿 Guzmán of Mexico. It has never been recorded who made the final gunshot to Pablo Escobar's ear. Moreover, Pablo's relatives even assume that he committed suicide, since Escobar always said he would shoot himself through the ear if he had no chance to escape. Definitely one of the more mysterious Pablo Escobar facts we may never know the answer to. Pablo Escobar died in Los Olivos, a middle-class barrio in Medellin, Colombia. Brigadier Hugo Martinez led the Colombian electronic surveillance team by using radio trilateration technology to track Pablo Escobar's radio telephone transmissions. From there, they were able to locate and corner him. Here are the 10 things you didn't know about Pablo Escobar. Number 10. He imported tons of product. The sheer scale of Escobar's empire becomes apparent when considering the sheer weight of the narcotics he was importing and exporting. The kingpin utilized compliant pilots to smuggle 70 to 80 tons of cocaine from Colombia to the US inside the plane's wheels. At the height of the Medellin operation, an estimated 15 tons of product was shifted to the US alone every single day. The cartel also utilized 2 remote-controlled submarines to export the goods undetected and spread the load. Number 9. He may have killed himself. Escobar was finally cornered by the Colombian National Police in December 1993, after radio triangulation techniques located his hideout in a middle-class area of Medellin. Escobar wasn't to be taken without a struggle, and a fierce firefight between the gangster and his bodyguard and police ensued. Both criminals were shot as they attempted to flee over rooftops, into an adjoining alley, Escobar in the thigh and torso. His body was found with a gunshot wound above his left ear. Though this may have been caused by a police bullet, or an execution by his bodyguard to avoid extradition, Pablo's brothers claim that the wound was in the precise location that Pablo had vowed to shoot himself should he ever be captured. He was buried in front of 25,000 mourners. Number 8. He lived extravagantly. As befits a real-life Tony Montana, Pablo Escobar lived a life of ostentatious wealth and extreme luxury. His holiday hideaway, Hacienda Nápoles, was a paradise spread over 5,000 acres, and contained everything from pools and bullrings, to a private zoo containing hippos, elephants and giraffes. The estate was used both for his family recreation, and to host cocaine-fueled parties filled with some of Colombia's most powerful and influential names. After his death, his family went into hiding and Hacienda Nápoles was torn apart by people looking for the rumored buried stashes of drugs. It's now a ruin inhabited by drifters, hippies and hippos. Number 7. He offered to pay off Colombia's national debt. One of the most insane things about Escobar's drug empire was the scale it operated on in the USA. It's estimated that he was supplying 80% of all the coke snorted in the US during the 1980s. The success of his foreign policy birthed one of Escobar's biggest fears: extradition to the States. Escobar had vowed that he would rather die than spend jail time in Northern America. To combat any chance of this, he attempted to strike an unbelievable deal with the Colombian authorities. He would personally pay off the Colombian national debt of $10 billion in cash, in return for a change to the extradition laws. Needless to say, he received a polite but firm thanks, but no thanks. Number 6. Some Colombians view him as a Robin Hood. To this day, residents of the poorer regions of Colombia make pilgrimages to Escobar's grave to give thanks and pray, as the religious would do with a saint. The reason? Escobar pumped millions of his own dollars into local communities to provide affordable housing for the poorest, as well as building hospitals, schools, churches and parks. He also distributed money freely to the most vulnerable members of society within his local area. To many of these residents, Escobar was seen as a Colombian Robin Hood, avoiding giving taxes to the rich government so he could feed the poor. Number 5. He murdered up to 4,000 people. Pablo Escobar may have had a warped generous streak towards his local community, but he remains one of the most ruthless and bloodthirsty gangsters the world has ever seen. Opponents were massacred and assassinations plotted. He blew up the headquarters of the DAS, the Colombian version of the FBI, in order to kill their director. Though exact figures are obviously hard to come by, it's generally accepted as fact that he murdered up to 4,000 people, including 200 judges and over 1,000 government workers, police officers and journalists. Number 4. He built his own jail. Escobar may have feared extradition to the USA, but he generally held the Colombian prison system in contempt. After assassinating a presidential candidate in 1991, the authorities convinced him to surrender in return for a reduced sentence and good treatment in prison. He acquiesced on the condition that he could help to design the prison. He was subsequently incarcerated in the luxury La Cathedral private prison, where he could receive visitors and play football and cook barbecues. The authorities weren't allowed within 3 miles of the compound. However, upon discovering that he was continuing to run his empire from behind bars, an attempt was made to switch him to another prison. Escobar promptly escaped. Number 3. He burned $2 million as fuel. In 1989, Forbes ranked Escobar as the 17th richest person in the world. It's fair to say that money held no object to the gangster, a fact exemplified by the fact that he allegedly spent $42,500 every month on rubber bands to keep his wads of cash in neat stacks. An anecdote from Escobar's time in hiding from the authorities speaks volumes of not only his attitude to money, but his love for his family, because murderous gangsters are people too, folks. His daughter became ill from the cold conditions, developing a bad case of pneumonia. Escobar promptly set alight to wads of cash totaling $2 million to ensure that she kept warm enough to get over the illness. Number 2. Rats ate billions of his earnings. When most people have pest infestations, the most they will lose is the uncovered leftovers that they were saving for breakfast the following morning. As with most things in his life, Escobar's rodent problems were on the insane side of excessive. It's estimated that he had to write off 10% of his profit margin every year due to wastage, e.g. rats gnawing away at his buried stacks of cash or water damage ruining the paper money. While 10% doesn't sound like any great shakes, for Escobar this accounted for between $1–2 billion annually. Just let that sink in for a while. Number 1. He was making $420 million per week. So, just how much was Pablo Escobar worth in total? Though he once claimed to merely be a decent man who exports flowers, he was estimated to be making up to $60 million per day, at the height of the Medellin cartel's powers. When the Forbes list was released in 1989, they estimated his wealth at $25 billion, though this may have increased to around $30 billion by the time of his death. As a man who ran a not exactly legitimate business, we can only deal in estimates, but the fact that Escobar once bought a Learjet solely to transport his cash around speaks volumes. As you sit down to enjoy the life of Pablo Escobar through Narcos, just remember, crime doesn't pay, kids. What do you think about this video? Do let us know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.